And good morning, everyone. I am Don Burke with the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and I will be your moderator. I want to welcome you to today's webinar on aftermarket automotive industry best practices. Also assisting us with this webinar is Davey Connors, the Deeks Environmental Program Consultant, and Angela Barger, the Environmental Stewardship Initiative Program Manager. We will begin in about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us. And hello again, everyone. For those that did not hear the opening, I am Don Burke with the Environmental Stewardship Initiative, and I am your moderator today. We welcome you to today's webinar on aftermarket automotive industry best practices. And assisting me is Davey Connors, our Deeks Environmental Program Consultant, and Angela Barger, the ESI Program Manager. We would like to thank the Waste Reduction Partners and the Land of Sky Regional Council for hosting this training on GoToWebinar. We would also like to thank Automotive Service and Tire Alliance, ASTA, for co-hosting this event as well as the NCDEQ's Division of Waste Management and Hazardous Waste section for presenting today. Now, just a few housekeeping items before we dig into today's topic. If you have audio issues and are using the audio through your computer, you can switch to your telephone. Just go to the audio tab in the webinar controls box and click phone. A phone number and code will then be shown for you to use to access the webinar. The call-in information is also in your webinar invite email. We are recording today's session. The link for the recording, PowerPoint slides, and associated handouts, which you'll see on the GoToWebinar control panel, will be posted as well to the ESI events webpage for everyone to access afterwards. That website is www.ncesi.org. I've also put this into the chat box as well. Now, to prevent feedback and unattended background noise, all attendees are muted. However, we want you to ask questions and share verbally, so in order to facilitate that, we will ask you to raise your hand when you want to speak. Now, be sure to mute yourself only through the GoToWebinar software using the little microphone button at the top of the control bar. It will be red when muted and green when live. If you don't necessarily want to speak, but you still have a question or comment, we encourage you to submit those through the questions box at any time. We will share these questions and comments after the presentation, wherein the remaining time will be dedicated to your questions. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with our program, the Environmental Stewardship Initiative is a voluntary assistance and recognition program. It's been part of NCDEQ since 2002. Yes, we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. And it is administered by the Division of Environmental Assistance and Customer Service, otherwise known as DEECS. We are partially funded by an EPA pollution prevention grant and promote environmental management systems to assist organizations in their efforts to continually improve their environmental footprints. We also encourage and facilitate networking and training events that allow for peer sharing between our members on a wide range of environmental topics. If you're not yet a member and would like more information, please email Angela Barger or myself. We'd be happy to share more information with you and answer any questions that you might have. Our contact information is there on the lower left of the screen. There is no cost to join, and all we ask is an annual report on the progress made toward your environmental goals. Now here's a fun splash screen with some of our current members. We'd love to see you part of that one day. We would like to thank Terry Albrecht and the Waste Reduction Partners assisting ESI staff by providing our outreach today via the GoToWebinar, and also their partners, Atlantic Sky Regional Council. WRP and the ESI are both part of NCDEQ's DEECS, which has a mission to support pollution prevention strategies and is actively promoting hazardous waste and hazardous material reductions. Terry's contact information is on the screen at the bottom. Feel free to reach out to him for more insight to the program. Now, we are very happy to be collaborating today with ASTA, the Automotive Service and Tire Alliance. The Automotive Service and Tire Alliance was formed in 2021 by the merge of the Independent Garage Owners of North Carolina and North Carolina Tire Dealers Association. They are the Southeast's largest member-sponsored nonprofit association serving the aftermarket automotive industry. Their mission: we exist to serve, support, and better the aftermarket automotive industry. And I'd like to welcome their executive director, Tricia Sauls. Tricia, thank you so much for helping us with this collaboration and this event today.
Oh, thank you, Don. Thank you so much for having us and inviting our members to view this seminar. I think it's an important thing for shops to be aware of. If anyone is not familiar with our organization and is a shop owner, I very much invite you to check out our website and see the different benefits programs we have. We do have a couple of options that would pertain to this topic today of hazardous waste best practices with Pew Lubricants and Universal Environmental. So if you're get through this and you want to know how you can better support in your own shop, we would be happy to help you with that. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Now, we are very grateful for NCDEQ's Division of Waste Management and Hazardous Waste section, once again presenting a hazardous materials roundtable event. Now, the primary purpose of the hazardous waste section is to prevent and reduce releases of hazardous substances and clean up contaminated sites. The hazardous waste section ensures a safe management of hazardous waste in North Carolina. The staff applies the adopted federal rules that incorporate the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, RCRA, requirements and additional state rules. Be sure to check out the program located on the NCDEQ DWM website. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Jeff Menzel. Jeff's an environmental specialist too, an inspector for DWM's hazardous waste section, and he will be presenting aftermarket automotive industry best practices. Jeff has also provided everyone with 2 handouts on guidance for used oil generators and universal waste management that are available on this GoToWebinar production, and will also be posted on the ESI events page, along with a PowerPoint presentation recording link. Again, that will be at www.ncesi.org. And Jeff, before I go on, I'm going to make you the presenter so you can go ahead and get your slides up. While he's doing that, Jeff has been with NCDEQ for 15 years. 5 of those years have been with the hazardous waste section. He is located in the Asheville area and covers the 17 westernmost counties in the state. Jeff has a degree in environmental science and enjoys mountain biking and fly fishing. Jeff, thank you again for joining us today. I can see your screen, it's in full mode, and I'll pass the baton on to you.
Okay, thanks, Don. Hello, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us on your lunch break. We have a short amount of time, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground, but like Don said, you can go back. This presentation is being recorded, so you can refer back to it at a later date. Today, I will be talking about used oil management and other common waste streams at garages. This is my contact information. Like Don said, I am an inspector with the hazardous waste section. This is my contact information. And just so you know, I know this picture didn't turn out so great, but just so you know, there's about 10 of us across the state. And after I get done presenting, if you find you have questions or things like that, what you can do is contact us, and we could come by your shop and do what we call compliance assistance, which means we're not coming in there to do like an unannounced inspection. We would just be coming in there to talk about issues, observe things and point out maybe areas for improvement. So, just keep that in mind. If that's something you might be interested in doing in the future, you can contact us and set that up. So, quick little history about what we do. The hazardous waste section ensures the safe management of hazardous waste in North Carolina. The state has adopted the federal rules, which are known as Resource Conservation and Recovery Act requirements, or RCRA, as you'll hear me use. These laws were passed in 1976 by Congress to provide a cradle-to-grave management of hazardous waste. So, where it's generated, where it's transported to, and then how it's ultimately disposed of. These rules are enforced by either EPA or the state delegated program, which we are, North Carolina Environmental Quality. Some people still know us as DENR. Our emails still say that. So, DENR and DEQ are the same thing. If you're a visual learner like me, you'll appreciate a couple historical photos as to, what kind of prompted these rules to come about. And unfortunately, I won't say on this scale, but there are, still we get complaints, and sometimes we do find, maybe not quite this bad, but we do find abandoned drums and things like that. So some of the things that happened historically are still occurring. Okay, so what is a hazardous waste? Usually, well, first of all, something needs to be a solid waste. So it's a expired product, contaminated product, just something that you cannot use anymore. And they generally exhibit 4 characteristics. And like I said, I'm going fast through this just to give you a quick background. I'll get into the more pertinent topics here in a second. But just know that hazardous wastes usually are ignitable with a flash point of less than 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The examples, some of the stuff you might see around your shop, acetone, toluene, xylene, MEK, those would all be examples of a flammable hazardous waste. The next one are corrosive waste. They have a pH of less than 2 or greater than 12.5. They're your acids, your bases, drain cleaners, things like that. The next one is reactive waste. They're unstable. They could explode under certain conditions. They're, certain kinds of acids and other chemicals. Sorry, I know I'm going quick through this, but finally, toxic waste. These include heavy metals, lead, silver, and things like that. So, like your used oils that you deal in, they can pick up metals like lead and chromium and things like that along the way, and they could be considered a toxic hazardous waste. So to get into kind of the bulk of the presentation today, I'm going to start with used oil. I'm sure you all deal with this on a daily basis, but what are used oils? Used oils are derived from crude oil or synthetic materials that have been used. Things like vegetable oil are not regulated as used oil. Used oils include lubricants, coolants, non-contact heat transfer fluid, cutting fluids, hydraulic fluids. The way they become contaminated is, through physical or chemical impurities. So as the oil is used up in the motor, it can pick up little bits of metals and things like that. Just a quick little bit about the history. Congress enacted used oil regulations in 1992, so it wasn't that long ago. And the idea is that if you manage used oil correctly, the regulations are going to be less stringent than normal hazardous waste requirements. So as you can see there, this is kind of the hazardous waste world here. Used oil kind of sits out here with, you know, just inside the hazardous waste world. And as I said, it can pick up metals along the way: cadmium, chromium, lead, mercury, silver, or chlorinated solvents, and that's why it needs to be managed appropriately. So the goals of the used oil regulations are to encourage the proper recycling of the used oil. And it's presumed that all used oil is considered to be recyclable until a decision has been made to be disposed of it. And that'll come into play here in a second. Just briefly, know that there's a whole set of regulations for used oil handlers out there. I don't, you know, some of that might apply to y'all a little bit. Most of you, I'm sure, just, you know, drain it out of the cars you're working on, collect it, and then have somebody else come in and transport it for you, refine it, etc. And those regulations would apply to those people doing that work. So what is a used oil generator? It's a person whose act or process first causes used oil to be subject to regulation. This is different from a hazardous waste generator. As a used oil generator, there's no distinction based on quantity. So you could have, you know, 5 gallons, 55 gallons, 5,000 gallons stored at your facility. There's really no limit on how much you can store. Just know there are exemptions for, you know, the household do-it-yourselfers, and then there's an agriculture exemption for farmers. I'm not going to get into that, but so, you know, this is probably the most relevant to you all. How do you store used oil? You store used oil in containers or tanks in good condition with no visible leaks. You want to have the label used oil somewhere on there, whether you take paint and, you know, spray it on there, or stencil, or, you know, get a sticker. Used oil are the two words. The reason being that's helpful for responders. You know, they can look over in the corner of the shop and say, oh, okay, that's used oil over there, if, you know, you had a fire or something like that. And the other reason is just it eliminates unknowns. If, you know, we show up, we get a complaint or something like that, we can look at that 55-gallon drum and say, okay, that's used oil. Just know there's other regulations that apply to the management of used oil. Those are underground storage tank or above ground storage tanks, if you have those, and spill prevention and control. I'm not going to get into those, but so as I said, used oil must be stored in containers and tanks, or tanks that are in good condition and labeled used oil. You can see in both of these examples, just a simple sticker on there is all it takes. Something we see from time to time, you know, people have waste oil on there. If you use the words, and I know it's you know, just the difference of a word or two, but if you use the term waste oil, that implies that it's going to be disposed of, which is different than your used oil, which is going to be recycled or recovered, right? So just know, if you have waste oil on your used oil tank, you know, just go out there, change the wording on that, and you'll be good. You know, this is, you know, kind of a common sight. I know we have all seen stuff like this, but you know, the public is out in your shops and they do call in complaints. You know, when they see stuff like this, what probably happened here is somebody left the top out of the drum. It rained, you know, a little bit of this stuff and water goes a long way, doesn't it? And, you know, makes a big mess. So, you know, when you're storing this stuff and managing it, just pay attention. You know, if something is damaged or you have a release, make sure you clean it up quickly. Don't leave the tops out, you know, don't let them overflow with rainwater. As a used oil generator, you must respond to releases of used oil. So monitor the level in your tanks. You know, you can, well, you probably can't make it out in this picture, but actually underneath the spill here, it does say used oil on their tank. But if you have something like this, you want to respond to it quickly. There are requirements for used oil transporters. Those would be the people that would come by and, you know, pick up with a vac truck or whatever they'll use, you know, pick up your used oil. They're required to have an EPA ID number, which, you know, is a notification they have to make so that, you know, EPA knows out there, you know, knows they're out there, you know, what business they're in, that kind of thing. As a used oil generator, you can self-transport to a collection center. Now, this has to be in a vehicle owned by the generator or employee of the generator. And then you can only transport less than 55 gallons at a time. So if you're going to self-transport, just know there's a couple little requirements there. Most of this goes without saying, but still from time to time, these things show up. So please do not use your used oil for dust control or vegetation control. You know, and of course, we all know this, but do not discharge into sewers or storm drains, you know, surface water, septic tanks, or just onto the ground, period. So as you know, your municipal landfill will not take liquids and, you know, definitely can't dispose of used oil in the landfill. As a used oil generator, you can burn that if you have an oil-fired space heater, which I'm in the western part of the state, and that's a pretty common practice. You know, just know that you can do that. So, you know, the inspector shows up. Well, how do you manage used oil? Well, inspector, we put it in the space heater and we burn it in the wintertime. So that is a practice that you can use. You know, some of the common deficiencies that we see are mislabeling or not labeling at all. So remember, used oil is the term you want to have on whatever tank or drum you're putting this stuff into. Make sure that container is sound, in good condition. You know, a tote, a plastic tote, 250-gallon tote, whatever, sitting out in the elements will only last so long. So if that's what you're using to store your used oil in, just know you probably have to replace it from time to time. Of course, respond to any spills and watch those used oil buckets, you know, out in the elements. Don't let them fill up with rainwater. Okay, I'm moving on to the next subject. I'm sure y'all have questions about used oil, but you know, maybe we can get to those at the end. The next waste stream that we see at garages are lead tire weights. You know, I know a lot of the industry is starting to move to composites and, you know, other materials, but still these lead tire weights are pretty common. You know, if lead weights are going to be disposed of, meaning if you're going to throw them into the trash, then, you know, just know that lead is one of the 8 RCRA heavy metals, and so it would need to be managed as hazardous waste. Now, if it's going to be recycled, going to be, you know, scrap metal, then the RCRA regulations don't apply. So if you're collecting like the picture there on the right, if you're collecting those tire weights and they're going out for scrap metal, that's fine. You don't really have to, apply, or you're not required, to store them like you would a hazardous waste. But as I said, we do get complaints about garages, and when we show up, we'll ask about the tire weights. How do you manage them? A common line I've heard more than once is some guy comes and picks them up and makes fishing weights out of them, right? Well, that's fine, right? That implies that they're being recycled, but just know that, have a few questions for that individual and make sure that they're doing it in a safe manner. I'll tell you a quick little story. In another part of the state a couple years ago, that same scenario was playing out. The gentleman was coming by these shops, picking up all the weights, the lead weights that he could. He was taking them home, melting them down into sinkers and things like that. But the problem was he was doing this inside his home, outside of his home. There was contamination all around his yard, inside his house. I think they ended up doing blood work on his kids, and their lead levels were through the roof. So, just know when you say, oh, somebody's picking these up to recycle them, just, track that down. Make sure that you can kind of close the gap on, what happens to them when they leave your shop, so that you can adequately claim that they're being recycled. Parts washers, some of y'all will have these. Usually they contain, well, if you don't have them, what they are, they're used for basically just like they sound. They're cold cleaning units, they're degreasers, and they're basically for cleaning grease off of parts for the most part. Usually they use solvents, which, if you remember back to the, flammable waste part of hazardous waste, a lot of solvents are, when they're discarded, are considered hazardous waste. So your mineral spirits, your lacquer thinners, your MEKs, those, when disposed of, are hazardous waste. A lot of parts washers are going to what they call aqueous cleaners. They're usually like a kind of a, like a citrus, or some kind of acidic type solution. A lot of times those aren't hazardous waste until they pick up contaminants along the way. So if you have a parts washer, just be aware that the cleaning solution after it's used up is usually hazardous for one of the following. That flash point is less than 140 degrees. It can be on the EPA's hazardous waste list, which there are some listed solvents out there. It can have a pH of less than 2 or greater than 12.5, or along the way, as it's doing what it's supposed to, it picks up some toxic metals, lead, chromium, things like that. And most spent solvents are hazardous waste. What I've see a lot of shops have kind of gone to is their vendors out there. Safety Clean is one. I'm not, I don't know all the vendors' names out there, but they'll come by periodically your shop. They'll change out the fluid in the parts washer, replace it with new. It takes a lot of the burden off of the shop to manage this stuff appropriately. But if you have a parts washer that, you make the call, okay, I can't use this stuff anymore, let's pour it into a 55-gallon drum. And, you start getting drum after drum after drum in the back part of the property. That's when you might want to start asking questions like, how should I be managing this stuff? So just a little tip there. You know, and as I said, a lot of the parts washers are going to aqueous cleaners, or, you know, what are considered non-flammable and non-toxic. You know, if you have questions about these, contact your vendor, whoever, you know, provided the parts washer or the fluid in it. They have the safety data sheets. They can get those to you, and then you can talk about disposal options. As a hazardous waste inspector, we have several items that we considered universal waste. I'm going to move on. This is a new topic. And the reason they're called universal waste is that most industries, most garages generate these types of waste. They're your fluorescent lamps, your batteries, aerosol cans, pesticides. Okay, and they can be hazardous waste as well, because they can, you know, pick up metals, like I was saying, along the way, or are flammable. But EPA said, hey, we know a lot of people generate this type of waste, so we're going to kind of simplify the regulations on how they need to be managed. But just know that you just, you know, throwing them in the trash is usually not an acceptable practice. A little bit about the history of universal waste. Established in 1995, it provided more streamlined, less stringent requirements for the collection of batteries, pesticides. When I say lamps, I mean light bulbs, and thermostats. These type of hazardous waste, especially lamps and batteries, tend to be generated at a lot of different types of facilities across the United States, and so they're called universal waste. Generally speaking, you don't have to do costly analytical testing or reporting. They don't have to be accumulated in what we call a hazardous waste accumulation area. They don't have to be counted as a hazardous waste generation rate, and you can keep them on site for up to a year. Like I said, those are lamps, light bulbs, batteries, aerosol cans, mercury-containing devices, and pesticides. So just recently, North Carolina adopted adding aerosol cans to the universal waste regulations. So the definition of an aerosol can, if you don't know, I call them spray cans, but you know, they're your spray paints, they're your spray foams, they're your spray adhesives, they're your, you know, your carb cleaners, whatever. That, you know, those would meet the definition of an aerosol can. A waste aerosol can is one that will no longer be used for its intended purpose. So, you know, most of y'all are probably going to use up what's in the can, you know, and then be done with it. But from time to time, we all know that can fail. It can run out of pressure. You know, if you're dealing with spray foams or something like that, they'll set up before you get a chance to use it all. And then you have what we call a waste aerosol. So if you're throwing your waste aerosol cans in the trash, that's fine. Just make sure they're absolutely empty. That means that no liquid is felt or heard when the container is shaken by hand, and that no gas is released when you do the actuator or the valve on the top. If you've thrown away, you know, half full aerosol cans, just know that you might be, you know, throwing away hazardous waste in the regular trash. Okay, so if that is the case, if, you know, you use a little bit of this aerosol can, you set it on the shelf, a year later you come back, oh, this is, you know, I can't use this anymore. So what do? Well, you can start putting those into a structurally sound container, and by that I mean not some ripped up cardboard box, but something that, you know, if you had a release, is going to hold the contents, you know, in there. So, you know, even a plastic bag inside a cardboard box would be would be considered sound if there are no holes or anything. You then collect these, hold them onto a year, and then you can ship them out as hazardous waste. If you don't know who to contact to see about getting that done, odds are these same people that are dealing with your used oil and your lead weights, your batteries and stuff like that, you can probably find a vendor out there that'll take these as well. So, as I said, structurally sound container. If the cans are absolutely empty, you can throw them in the trash or send them out for scrap metal, but we all know that's not always the case. Okay. A lot of people that go through, I go to some industries, they go through a ton of these things. What they do is they take the tops off the little actuator to kind of prevent, any more release. And then they manage them, in a way to reduce spills. So a few examples of what good storage containers look like. Got a cardboard box with a plastic bag liner in it. You got a 55-gallon metal drum here. You got, just some plastic totes there. And as I said, ripped up cardboard box and gonna, really hold those well if you have a release. So, okay, if you have aerosol cans that show leaks, of course, clean those up quickly. And then whatever you're putting them into, just put the letters on there: universal waste aerosol cans, waste aerosol cans, or used aerosol cans. So that, again, responders show up. If you had an event, they can look over and tell what the stuff is. This is a good example. Now, I said there are some industries that really go through these things. This is a good example of good management practice here. Okay, mercury containing devices. Don't see too many of these in garages, but if you have thermostats, barometers, or some kind of pressure gauge, just know that they could contain mercury. You do have those, and you do need to dispose of them. You'll have to shop around for a vendor that can handle those, but you can simply store them and put mercury containing equipment until you find a proper disposal option for those. Pesticides the same way. I know this doesn't pertain to y'all too much, but just know that you can manage pesticides as a universal way. So identify them if they're products that can no longer be used, in their waste. Just put used pesticides or waste pesticides, and then find the appropriate disposal option for them. Of course, if going back to the start, if this, all these things that we're talking about, if they can still be used in some application, then that's fine. Even if that spray can that you're touching up these parts with can't be used over here, but can be used in another process or things like that, it doesn't have to necessarily be a waste. So just keep that in mind. I know this will be another one that you all deal with, the lead acid batteries. They're part of the universal waste world as well. There are other types of batteries out there, and as cars transition to more electric type vehicles, I would imagine that will probably this will become a bigger topic. But most of what we're seeing today are the lead acid batteries, but there's a list here on the slide of other types of batteries that need to be managed as universal waste. Your alkaline batteries, your AAAs, your AA's, things like that, they're typically considered non-hazardous, and they can be thrown in the regular trash. But if you can find recycling options, we do encourage that. So how do you manage used batteries? You know, most places that we go to, the smaller type, they'll put in a bucket or, you know, drum, things like that. You know, put a date on there. Remember, you have about a year to store these things before you need to get rid of them. I know a lot of y'all deal with the lead acid batteries. These are bigger, they're heavier, they're bulkier. You know, just, you know, if you can, most of the good operations that I see, you know, put them on pallets or, you know, how they're going to be transported, and then store them out of the elements if you can, definitely out of the way of like forklift lift traffic and things like that. And then, of course, label them universal waste batteries, or used batteries. Finally, I'm going to talk about waste lamps, light bulbs. You know, for the most part, these are your fluorescent lamps, your mercury vapor lamps, sodium lamps. You know, if you tell the new guy to, hey, take these old fluorescent bulbs and manage them appropriately, and you walk out back and he's doing this, then, you know, this would not be considered proper management. So what do? You change out the old fluorescent bulbs in your shop over to LEDs. The way you would manage those is put them in a cardboard box, label them universal waste lamps, and then you have a year to get rid of those. You know, keep an eye out for you know, holes on the sides of the box or something, that if the bulbs break, you know, that mercury can get out pretty easily. If you do have you know, break a bulb, just clean it up quickly. You can, you know, put that stuff into a plastic bag or something like that, and then ship it out with your other bulbs. You know, this is a picture of a good example of the way we like to see bulbs managed when we come out to your site, taped up, you know, ready to be shipped out. When we see, you know, stuff like this, we can cite violations. Just know these bulbs can break pretty easily or get forgotten about. So no open bulbs, keeping them in a closed box, label them used lamps, universal waste lamps, something like that. So, I mean, growing up, I remember seeing dumpsters full of these things like this. So that's what we're trying to get away from now, because they do contain mercury. And that's going to wrap up the presentation for today. I'm going to get out of this screen and go back to, let's see if we can take questions.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was fantastic. Loved your bullet points. And I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. Davey, do you see anything?
I'm not seeing any. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them in the question box or raise your hand.
Yeah, there was a lot of information, but again, if you do, you know, it's hard to pick up, you know, on all that stuff that quickly. But you know, if you have questions, just know that there's, you know, about 10 of us across the state. You can contact us. You know, give us a phone call. You don't have to tell us, you know, who you are or whatever, and just say, hey, I want to run this scenario by you. See what you think. Or like I said, we could come out to your shop, walk around with you, let you know where, you know, we see improvements could be made, and deal with it like that. So.
Okay,
Well, Jeff,
we do actually have a couple of questions.
Great.
Carl Hicks says, do engineers get PhDs for this webinar?
No, well, it's not being taught by an engineer, so. Yeah,
They call me a
that's
TD
the thing
agent.
about RIPRA and hazardous waste is it's really tough to go through in 45 minutes. And that's why I say, think about your scenarios at your shops and give us a call. We can absolutely talk through it.
Excellent. And James Brown says, great job on the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, when you go out to a site, is there a common theme that you usually see that stands out as far as a compliance issue that you may come across?
Yeah, so most of our job is spent going to industries and stuff like that where they're dealing with, a lot of hazardous waste, but we do get a fair amount of complaints on garages and stuff like that. I'll tell you an example. A couple years ago, I had one, somebody overheard two guys in the shop saying, well, what do we do with this? I think it was antifreeze or something. And the other guy said, well, just dump it out back. Meaning he was telling the new coworker, like, go put it in the tank out back to be managed, but that's not what the customer heard. So, what we see a lot of times is used oil releases. You have the tote or whatever you put it in, you don't put the top back in it. When you're done, it's outside. A little bit of the stuff gets onto the ground and it goes a long way. When you're dealing with your waste, you don't want to be in the habit of, making your own landfill, I guess. So go through periodically, take inventory. Wow, all of a sudden I have 3 drums of this stuff. I have 15 lead acid batteries sitting out here. And, I was just told last week they're going for like, $10, I think, the car batteries, so there's value to some of this stuff. I know, used oil doesn't quite have the same value it used to, but, just you take inventory of product you're bringing in, do the same with your waste generation.
Yeah. I know when I was with the program and I go visit garages, there are a lot of, well, I just didn't know type of things, such as fluorescent lamps. And when they change them out, they weren't disposing of them. They were just storing them up top on the rafters for 5-10 years. They weren't aware of the 1 year or less rule, that you really need to get them out there or properly packaged, especially to prevent breakage. So I know there are a lot of just folks just didn't know. And that's why I'm glad you mentioned at the beginning, you'll be more than happy to come out for technical assistance, visit. That's always helpful because and I'd see some of the best management practices for the batteries. You showed a photograph when they're out in the weathering. They're kept right outside the garage bay door where the elements hit them day and night. And all you had to do was move them maybe within 3-4 feet away to prolong the integrity of them. So yeah, a lot of it was just best management practices that they were just unaware of, or it wouldn't occur to them. Like universal waste rules and especially RCRA. So the other one,
washers and things like that. If you have questions, you can contact us. If you don't want to contact us because you think it's going to bring too much attention to your shop, contact your vendor. Who usually they'll set up the parts washer for you as long as you agree to buy the cleaning fluid from them. So contact them. How do you manage this stuff? Exactly. Just don't start storing it in drums out back and then 10 years later, so.
The other thing I'd just like to throw in there that I remember saying, if you have an above ground, tank for used oil and there's no secondary containment, be very careful of not allowing that used oil to hit the ground. Because I would see a lot of that, the stains on the grounds.
Yeah, that's pretty common. A lot of shops, they'll have, something in the garage that pumps the used oil over to a outside above ground storage tank. if you're not monitoring that level in that tank outside, that's right outside on the other side of the wall, it's real easy to overflow that, and then you got a mess. So, set up a system. The places that we go to that manage effectively, they have what we call maintenance schedules in place, where you go through, create a checklist and go down the checklist quarterly, monthly, whatever it takes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got one more question. Let's see here. I'm a stormwater inspector, and discharge to the ground could be considered illicit and be grounds for a notice of violation. That was from Julia Howley.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. And like I said, when this stuff hits water, either rainwater, well, any amount of used oil that hits the surface water, creek, river, whatever, has to be reported. But when this stuff hits the ground and then gets rained on, it always maybe looks worse than it actually is, but it's hard to tell, right? Was that 5 gallons that just got spilled, or was that 50? So yeah.
Great. Well, you see Jeff and Trisha's contact information on the screen. And again, this will be posted to the ESI events page at www.ncesi.org. So feel free to give us a chance to get the recording link on this. And once we do that, we'll have this and the handouts, the PowerPoint slides posted for your use. Jeff, thank you again. It was a great presentation. Loved your bullet points all throughout. And Trisha, thank you so much for the collaboration. I hope to work with you both again here in the future.
All right.
If there are no other questions, thank you for attending. Now, please watch for a survey for your feedback and check out the ESI webpage, as I said. And the survey, it really just take a few minutes to complete. It helps us improve the ESI and make sure that we are offering informational topics in which you are interested. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Hope you have a great day. Take care.
Thank
Thanks.
you.